Education has become one of the most fiercely debated political battlegrounds. Billions of pounds of our money are poured into schools every year. But there's an aspect of education that is rarely questioned, a slow, creeping change in the makeup of our schools. 1/3 are now faith schools.
I did. I converted to Catholicism.
For the sake of your child?
For the sake of my child.
If you come to our school, we're very much open minds.
What we are trying to indoctrinate is a view that faith matters.
Some say parents must be able to educate their child in their faith.
Do you believe that parents have the human right to choose the education for their children or not?
Others fear this is limiting and divisive.
To separate yourself off from the rest of humanity is deeply, deeply tragic.
Isn't it time for our society to rethink what is best for children?
I want to explore the balance of rights between a parent's right to educate a child in their own faith and the children's rights to determine their own beliefs and approach the world with a genuinely open mind.
One in 3 state schools in our country is now a faith school, a school with formal links to a religion. These schools have extraordinary privileges. Because 60 years ago, churches provided half the money for their schools, many were allowed to discriminate on religious grounds in selecting pupils based on parents' faith and in recruiting staff. They could also have the freedom to teach their own syllabus of religious education, RE. Today, we taxpayers fund the running of these schools and also pay up to 90% of the cost of building them. But the problem is the churches held on to their special powers in their schools. And then the government under Tony Blair made a decision that changed Britain forever. It oversaw the foundation of over 100 new faith schools, including Muslim, Hindu and Sikh schools, along with 42 academies sponsored by Christian organisations.
A big man for a big job. Charles Clarke's waited a long time for this.
This man was Education Secretary under Blair. Why did he open the floodgates?
You could say, well, we're only going to keep it that you have Christian and a tiny proportion of other faith schools. I think that leads you into serious risk of discrimination in relation to saying it's okay to have a Christian faith school, but for the sake of argument, not a Muslim faith school, which I think is not acceptable, and therefore you've got to have the same rule for all.
I understand Charles Clarke's desire not to discriminate against minority religions. I agree we need one rule for all, but I think the government turned the wrong way. It should have abolished the faith component altogether, not rolled out more faith schools.
Now, you can make a logical argument, I completely understand it. In fact, I first was a co-author of a pamphlet about this in 1978, which says abolish all faith schools. But I think you've then got to look at how that relates to what the population as a whole feel about faith schools themselves.
Well, you wouldn't have to abolish them, you would just stop supporting them with government money.
Well, that's the same as abolishing them. I mean,
anybody, yes.
You can go. I mean, the net effect of this would be to close thousands of schools.
Let the schools remain, but abolish the separation between Catholic, Protestant, etc.
No, but you're saying take the money away from a school which has that character.
Yes,
and that means
the school could stay. It's got the same building, same teachers.
No, I understand, but you're
yeah.
taking away 90% of their revenue funding. Closing these schools, which I think is the effect of what you say, is something that wouldn't be accepted.
But it's their decision to close it. I mean, they have the option.
Okay, so I'm Secretary of State for Education, and 4,000 schools are closed by, their decision, not my decision. But as a result of what I have said, hypothetically, waving your big stick, which you've offered me, I don't think that the society would accept that.
Having been a key player in this huge gamble with our country's education system, you'd hope there'd be more enthusiasm and conviction in Charles Clarke's backing for faith schools. In fact, we find he used to be against faith schools, and his main defence of them now seems to be that voters wouldn't agree to abolishing them. And I'm not at all convinced Charles Clarke is right about public feeling. In fact, we commissioned an ICM opinion poll that showed a clear majority, 59%, still believed that schools should be for everyone, regardless of religion, and the government should not be funding faith schools of any kind. I believe the government must act and take the faith out of faith schools. The first and most outwardly dramatic change being brought about by these schools has been a bizarre distortion of parents' behaviour, particularly in the push for primary school places. About 7% of the British population worship in church, but around 36% of primary schools are run by the churches, and they can select pupils on the basis of parents' faith.
Parental choice? Okay, let's talk about parental choice. Suppose I'm a parent living with my children exactly here in Oxford, where we are standing now. If we want a faith-based primary school, we've got all these red dots to choose from within easy walking distance. There's St Philip and St James, there's St Aloysius, a Catholic school, and there's St Barnabas, another Anglican school. But if we want a non-faith-based school, we've got to go miles, here, here, or here, or here. Parents who wish to exercise their choice of a non-faith-based education for their children are effectively discriminated against. They're excluded from 1/3 of British state-funded primary schools.
How do parents feel about this? I've come to Mumsnet.
Justine?
Richard.
Hello.
How nice to meet you. Thank you for
very
coming.
much for having me.
Welcome to Mumsnet
Well, I'm
Towers.
really looking
Mumsnet is a web forum where parents get together online using pseudonyms to chat freely about issues involving their children. I'm here to ask about their experience of faith schools.
Slug is saying it's not that we're forced into a choice, it's that we were excluded from state-funded schools because of our lack of faith.
It would be unacceptable, of course, to exclude people on the basis of their race, but somehow it's okay if it's their parents' religion.
Joe Bounds' son is excluded from all 3 of the local primary schools, 2 Anglican and 1 Catholic, on the grounds that his parents are not churchgoers. Oh God, there's so much going on, I can't keep up. Hang on.
If parents don't want their children to be excluded, the other option, of course, is to fake a faith.
Our neighbours trot along to church every Sunday, rolling their eyes as they go, all so that their children can go to the local school. Well, we seem to be hearing that again and again.
I went to meet one couple who wanted to send their daughter to what they thought was the best school in their area, a Catholic primary. But the problem was they weren't practicing Catholics.
The SATs was 100%. So, you know, first child, you want the best of the best for your child. Yeah, we spent 4 years going to church, doing the right thing.
You went to church in order to get the child into the school?
Yeah.
Church every Sunday.
Yeah, that's part of the criteria. Attendance, parish priest has to sort of sign you off.
You mean he stood at the door and ticked your name off as you walked in?
Not quite, but almost. After church, everyone was crowding the priest to say, "Hi, look, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here." Helen converted to Catholicism.
Converted to Catholicism?
I did.
From what?
From Protestants.
You were brought up?
Plymouth Brethren.
Plymouth Brethren in Scotland?
Yeah. So that was my commitment to my daughter.
Did you have to do anything else? Any other hoops you had to jump through?
Be nice to the priest.
Be nice to the priest in what sort of way?
Well, if he had a cough, you get him some cough mixture, or, just generally feed his ego.
That's not too serious bribery, I suppose. Was there anything more serious than that?
Well, it got to the stage where it was sort of hinted at that things like the church roof needed fixing, and the fee of £5,000 was sort of bandied about that if you sort of contributed that amount, your child was guaranteed a place in school.
But if you gave £5,000 to the church,
you guaranteed a spot.
You would get your child into school guaranteed.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Because it's not money to him, but if his church looks like it's getting bums on seats on Sunday, if the coffers are full, he's doing a good job, isn't he? Because he actually said that to me. It's about bums on seats.
We contacted the priest in question. He denied these claims and stated he had nothing to do with admissions, which were dealt with by an independent body. Of other faiths, the Church of England told us that not every admission to their schools is based on parents' religion, and it hopes no parent feels compelled to worship to secure their child a place. The Board of Deputies of British Jews makes no apology that parents must demonstrate a commitment to the values and ethos of Judaism. But why are parents who hold no faith sending their children to faith schools? It seems to be about results. League tables show that of primaries last year with perfect SAT scores, 2/3 were church-run. So what's going on? Are faith schools better? Surely God isn't helping pupils in exams. Through a massive analysis of 500,000 primary school pupils, this man now has the authoritative answer.
We could compare children who live in the same postcode, so you'd be comparing houses next to each other. And if you do this and compare children in these very similar circumstances, one going to a faith school, one not going to a faith school, you find actually the rate at which these children progress is very, very similar. There's not much of a performance advantage when measured on these terms. So the kind of upshot of that is that really all the performance advantage that you observe for faith schools is to do with the motivation of the parents, it's to do with the background, their wealth.
So the evidence suggests that the idea that improved results in faith schools are due to faith is a myth. It's about the social level of pupils and the pushiness of parents prepared to jump through hoops to get their children selected. Do we conclude from this then that parents are wasting their time struggling to get their children into a faith school?
Well, this is what, looking at the data that we've got, that's what the conclusion you would come to.
It might seem that there's nothing deeply wrong with parents making a pact with beliefs they don't hold in order to get their children into faith schools. A little harmless hypocrisy, perhaps. But I worry that these parents may be unwittingly saddling their children with ways of thinking that are hard to shake off.
One in 3 schools in Britain is now a faith school, and their number is increasing throughout our green and pleasant land. As a non-believer, I have concerns about this, but not for the reasons you might imagine.
Remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them.
Perhaps surprisingly, I'm in favour of religious literacy.
As we glide over the English